Welcome, I'm Bankole Thompson from inside the studios of WADL TV 38, Detroit's Urban TV station. This is the first edition of Center Stage. Every week you read me the Michigan Chronicle newspaper, and please continue to do so. But here as host of this program, every week I will be dealing with all kinds of issues, from public transportation to the economy, to foreclosures, to education. Every issue will be dealt with on Center Stage, from those in authority to those in the streets whose lives have been impacted by policy. We'll discuss all these issues on Center Stage. So to begin our commemorative edition of Center Stage, we are discussing an event that happened last week, and that is the unfortunate demise of Senator Edward Kennedy, regarded as the last, perhaps major legacy of the Kennedy legacy. And so I have in the studio Ron Scott, local Detroit historian, and Michigan's youngest female lawmaker, State Representative Shanelle Jackson, here on the studio with me, face-to-face, to discuss the Kennedy legacy in Black America. And then ahead on the program, I have Republican John Garfield and UAW member Michael Joseph to square off on the healthcare debate, again, still on the Kennedy legacy. Thank you very much for coming on Center Stage.
Thank you for having me.
Let's begin. You know, the headlines have been all over the country. Black lawmakers are praising the legacy of Senator Kennedy. And I want to read something quickly here before we get to what you guys feel. America, this is from the House Majority Whip James Clyburn from South Carolina. America mourns the loss of a legendary leader and public servant, Senator Edward Kennedy. His body of work spans a near half-century, but will live forever. He was a protector of the least of these and the champion of equal rights, equal justice, equal opportunity for all Americans, whether it's civil rights, education, public health, or a livable minimum wage. His work has improved American lives in different ways. What is your take here from a Detroit perspective?
Well, one of the things I want to say is that we can present all these platitudinous and euphemistic statements about Teddy Kennedy, but when it really comes down to it, Teddy Kennedy humanized or attempted to humanize America, attempted to humanize the world. I like the whole focus that he took in relationship to challenging the apartheid government in South Africa and so forth, something which one would not have believed anyone would have done. He really followed the legacy of his brothers and sisters and so forth, really, because you don't hear that much about Eunice Kennedy Shriver, and here he was responsible for the Americans with Disabilities Act. That's the next level of dealing with humanity. It's not just about black and white, but it's about the whole gamut of humanity. So what Teddy Kennedy did was to try to overcome some of, as he suggested in his recent letter to the Pope, some of his personal demons, to essentially right the wrongs and deal with some of the issues that were important. And I think the second point that's really important is that he knew how to use the instrument of government to actually work on behalf of the people. Today, a number of people, I think, who are lesser selves, know how to use the government to promote themselves. And I think that the benefit of his money and the benefit of his position and his family allowed him to do that. So I think the key element is not just the legislation, but the humanization of America. The
humanization of America. State Representative Shanelle Jackson, you are a lawmaker. What is the example and what are your thoughts on Ted Kennedy's demise?
What a great loss. I mean, to whom much is given, much is required is the first thing that comes to me. Here's a man who had all of the privilege that anyone could ever hope for or aspire to have, but he decided, as the gentleman said here, to be human and to understand the plight of those around him who he might never have had to touch if he didn't want to. To me, that speaks volumes. I mean, we live in such an individualistic society today where so many of our youth are taught, and young adults and older adults believe, at the end of the day, as long as I'm okay, me and mine, I'm fine. He called us to look beyond ourselves, he spoke to social justice and what it means to have a collective good. And so it's a great loss for America. It's a great loss for the world.
You know, let me read something quickly, and then I want to ask you guys a question. Just about his push for sanctions against apartheid in South Africa. In fact, it's in this week's edition of the Michigan Chronicle. The African National Congress, that was a party that was headed by Nelson Mandela, said Kennedy was among leaders who championed the opposition against the apartheid regime in South Africa. And what they said was this. In 1985, he drew attention to apartheid when he visited the prison where Mandela was being held, the Paul Small prison. And this is what Kennedy was quoted to have said. He said, "Behind these walls are men that are deeply committed to the cause of freedom in this land." And this was against the advice of the South African government at the time. But coming back on the home front here, a lot of people say that, well, he could afford to do this because he doesn't have to worry about money or power because he comes from a family. So he could afford this kind of sacrifice.
Well, I think it's, yeah, he could afford it, and I think that's the benefit. But that doesn't mean that simply because he can afford it, that he always will be in a situation where he could do that. It's very easily, the Kennedys, like anyone else, have had their own tragedies and losses, both politically and personally. So essentially, no matter what you think he may or may not have lost, he didn't become president of the United States. No one knows whether or not his positions that he took had an impact on whether or not he was able to do that. I think the fundamental issue here is Kennedy challenged both the apartheid government and essentially challenged the corporate leaders in America, and also was able to challenge the Democratic Party. I feel that the soul of the Democratic Party has been severely cut into. The Democratic Party is fighting as hard as it can is to crawl to the center. And Teddy Kennedy challenged them to remain true to their ideals and to their values. And yeah, I think it's important in the political economy, that's what it is,
right,
for people who have the capital to take the stands that they can, that maybe some of us who don't have that liberty.
And you are a lawmaker, yes? Let me get your take.
I was just going to say that I think that whether or not he could afford it is irrelevant. He was called to leadership. He answered the call that was on his life. When I talk to young people, when I talk to Detroiters, Michiganders, I say to them, what is the calling that you have? Each one of us has something that we were born to do, an impact that we are born to make on the world. Are you answering that? Are you standing up? Are you walking in that? Here's a man who lived a life of walking in that calling. He did everything that he could to have a positive impact on everyone he touched. He wasn't perfect. He made a number of mistakes, professionally and personally. But at the end of the day, this is a person who did what it is he believed he was born to do. And as a result, millions of people's lives were changed. Plus, as a policymaker, I mean, I just have to be honest and acknowledge. I mean, here's a man who put 300 or more pieces of legislation into American law. This is one person in his career. I mean, we've got legislators who, if they could get one good piece of legislation, one bill out, you know?
Thank you very much. We'll round it up there. You said something very important. He was called. There is a calling. Well, one of his calling was healthcare, universal healthcare, single-payer healthcare. When we come back on the program, we'll have a roundtable from Republican John Garfield and the UAW member Michael Joseph will square off on Ted Kennedy's calling, which was healthcare for all. Thank you very much
for coming on the center stage.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back.